In 1989, when Sega's 16-bit system came out, it was going against a machine that was just hitting its stride. I am the Game Collector, and this is Second Opinion Games, and today we look at the Sega Genesis versus the good old Nintendo Entertainment System from 1989 to 1991.
Second Opinion Games.
To keep this video a little more refined, I decided to pick 3 games from each year from each console to see who won that individual year. So in 1989, the Nintendo was just hitting its stride. We got Mega Man 2, probably the best Mega Man game, and it's all because of Cutman's weapon. You could fire it in any direction, and it really does heavy amounts of damage with barely taking up any of the, Cutman energy stuff that you tend to have. So this is a fan favorite amongst Mega Man players, and is definitely one of the best platform games to ever exist. Even without onboard memory to save, it still has a very unique saving system, which allows you to jump into your game again and again. Also, you could pick any stage you want from the beginning of the game. Also, the Nintendo got Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, this is not what we were expecting from a TMNT game at the time, because all of the turtles look kind of funny. Also, the jumping is just overall awkward, and the gameplay here is unbelievably difficult. Sometimes your energy will fall and fall fast, and you better believe that damn level will just drain your turtles to outright oh my godness, because this level is insanely difficult. I'm actually pretty darn good at it, and I can fly through it pretty quick, but overall this entire game gets frustrating, especially once you get to the Technodrome level. Disney's DuckTales was pushed hard by Nintendo Power, playing as a pogo-sticking Scrooge McDuck, using your cane as the ultimate weapon to hit boulders up in the air, collect treasure, and stomp all of your enemies to death. The Beagle Boys are gonna be here trying to ruin your day. You can get Gizmo Duck and Launchpad McQuack to help you out from time to time, as well as Huey, Dewey, and Louie. This is a perfectly made classic platformer that is still very much beloved to this day. So all 3 are solid games for Nintendo back in 1989. However, on the other side of the aisle, we have the Sega Genesis, who was just hitting the market, and they brought forth a great pack-in title, Alter Beasts. Now, obviously, the graphics has been turned up a notch because this is a 16-bit system. And when you jump into Alter Beast itself, you will notice a couple of tricks that the Genesis does that the Nintendo just didn't do or didn't do very well, such as voice sampling. Of course, you hear the rise from your grave, which is great. Also, the transformations into different animals is also freaking awesome. Now, one of my favorite parts about this game is the cheat codes. You could actually select to turn into any freaking of your transformations in every single stage of the game. So you could plow through the whole game as the undefeatable dragon monster, or maybe even just try an all-human run. Even though the game can be beaten in about 13 minutes or less if you happen to be good at it, it offers tons of replayability in order to change out how you play the game. So this is pretty freaking awesome, and most people have no idea how good and well structured the game really is. Just like ghouls and ghosts. Now, you might think this little knight in shining armor can just throw everything. After all, he throws his lances, and they just sort of regenerate for him to throw again and again. He throws his knives, and he picks up his sword and doesn't throw that at all. So stay away from the sword, or basically any other weapon other than the lance or the knife itself. Now, you can also pick up gold suits of armor here. Don't worry, it's about as weak as gold too, because if you get hit the slightest bit, it will shatter into tiny pieces, leaving you in your underwear and your awesome beard to be exposed to the entire world. However, when you're in your golden armor, you have a supercharged weapon, which can definitely come in handy to defeat your evil foes. Again, a very masterful and beautiful game, and somewhat of a technical achievement with all the different parallax scrolling and lighting effects going on in this game, as well as huge monster battles on top of it. This is one that everyone will love, even if it happens to be one of the most frustratingly difficult games ever made. And one of the more forgotten about gems of 1989 was Rambo 3, a movie that was definitely rated R, got its very gruesome game on the Sega Genesis, a system that was being sold as your older brother's console because the Nintendo was just for little kids. Now Stallone could run around with his machine gun. He also has a knife, and why the heck would you even need this when your machine gun has infinite ammo? You could even fire a bow and arrow with explosive tips or plant time bombs to blow up stuff. And yeah, that knife actually does have a purpose. If you stab people up close and personal, you could refill your explosive arrows and your time bomb explosives to take down the bosses in this game. And sometimes the bosses get really big when you take on a Russian helicopter with your bow and arrow, or even a tank. Rambo is such a tough guy, they send a whole freaking tank to try and blow him up, and you know what? Rambo is of course gonna win. So in 1989, they had plenty of classic games for the NES and a strong launch lineup for the Sega Genesis. But I gotta say, I go back to those Sega Genesis games a lot more often than I do the old Nintendo. Most of the time, I stay away from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles because it gets really frustrating. My god, the game is rough. DuckTales is really short and can be beaten in no time. And Mega Man 2 is the one I come back to the most, but I've played it maybe a little too much. I'm not quite sure. However, Alter Beast I always come back to no matter how much I play it because I just want to sit down and knock it out once. Ghouls and Ghosts is unbelievably difficult, but I also love it. And Rambo 3, just that tank sequence, blowing up a tank with your freaking bow and arrow, is something I cannot stop doing. So the win in 1989 goes to the Sega Genesis. 1990, though, might be a different story. The Sega Genesis came out with Phantasy Star 2. It's a JRPG where your main character gets killed quite often in the beginning of the game. Don't worry, you can bring him back to life, except you can't. You have to bring a clone to life every single time your main character dies, meaning your main character just died. Now, the graphics here look kind of like an old NES game, but I can assure you this is definitely one of the best RPGs on the console. Over on the Nintendo side, we got Crystallis by SNK, and this is definitely one of the best action RPGs ever made. I'm for real on this. It is better than all of the Zelda games on the good old NES, and definitely is something that everyone should experience. And if you don't have a good old Nintendo to play it with, well, then you could play the Game Boy Color version. It is just as good, if not a little bit better, with some of the gameplay refined to level up just a little bit faster. Swinging it back over to the Sega Genesis, we have Ghostbusters, and I have a rather unpopular opinion that my favorite character is the everyday working man, Winston. However, he is not in this game whatsoever. So I'm stuck picking Bill Murray. He's the best, most well-rounded character in this game, and what this game is a run and gun, shoot everything type of experience, where you try to eventually kill the boss and steal all the ghosts from all the levels and collect tons of power-ups, including a spread shot and a bubblegum. The boss battles here are creative and really awesome. The graphics really show off what the Sega Genesis can do, and this is a darn good run and gun experience. However, over on the good old NES, we got Super C, the sequel to Contra itself, for one of the most tightly controlled run and gun games ever made. Now, up to the point where Contra 3 on the Super Nintendo came out, this was honestly my number one run and gun of all times. They took everything that the original Contra did and just pushed it to a more extreme. Instead of a 30 life code, you only get 10 lives, and that pushes you to rely on your skill and maneuverability in order to beat all of the levels. The overhead level isn't done as well as the hallway levels from the original original Contra game, but this is through and through a great game, and it just beats out that Ghostbusters. Swinging it back now to the Sega Genesis, and we have Strider, this epic running, slashing, destroy everything in sight, and this is definitely a human centipede that I am fighting. There are huge robot bosses here, like a giant ape. The controls are insane, the slopes are really steep, and it's hard to believe any game can get better than this in 1990, except of course for Super Mario Bros. 3 on the Nintendo Entertainment System. This was the pinnacle, the apex of what the Nintendo can do, and they had to have a huge movie just to show it off. It really put the Sega Genesis to shame, because every time I talked to my friends on the playground, everyone stopped talking about their Sega Genesis and could not stop with the Super Mario 3 chatter at the time, and it will forever go down as one of the best games ever made, and it definitely deserves that title. So in 1990, I gotta throw the win over to the good old NES. So we're all tied up now going into 1991. Over on the Sega Genesis, we have John Madden 1992, a completely good and realistic for the time football game. Controlling your quarterback and picking your plays as easy as can be. Also, if you're playing defense, you're going to pick whether or not you want the nickel defense or coverage or zone and all that other fun stuff. And the graphics look great, and some of the voice sampling here is done superbly well as well. Also, the music here isn't very noticeable or even here, meaning the whole game feels a little bit on the boring side. This is definitely a game just for the people that absolutely love the fine nuances of football, but don't really like having fun in normal video games. For that, we probably had to go to Techno Super Bowl over on the NES. This is a fast action, simplified game of football where you just pick what play you want to do, and your opponent would try to pick the exact same play that you picked in order to get some quick quarterback sacks. Now, you can see the whole field here, so making tight passes for large, huge gains was easy as can be. And also, there's a halftime show with freaking hot cheerleaders. Why didn't the Sega Genesis game have this in the bag? I have no idea. Techno Super Bowl was definitely the pinnacle of football games in 1991, especially for the NES. But Sega lands a huge punch with Streets of Rage. It's a Final Fight ripoff, so to speak. However, it is played at home, so you don't have to keep on dumping quarters into your Sega Genesis, and it looks great with a really gritty type of personality to the overall game. Each of the characters that you can play as have their own strengths and weaknesses, and it's just a really satisfying experience, even if this first game does move a little bit slow. So, to put against it, on the Nintendo, I have a very lesser known game called Gun Knack. This is a vertical shooter where you just destroy everything and pick up tons of power-ups. This is also extremely satisfying and freaking sweet with the sense of speed that Nintendo managed to push out of this little console. I put it on the same level as maybe Blazing Lasers on the TurboGrafx 16 because I feel like it's just that game, only Nintendo-ified. So, man, Nintendo is just beating down the Sega Genesis at this point. However, that might not last for long because Sega had a juggernaut up its sleeve with Sonic the Hedgehog. It was bright and colorful in ways that I didn't even know the Sega Genesis can do because most of their games were rather dark up until this point. It was a game so huge they had to readjust what pack-in game they needed for their console to really sell it. Simple to control with only one button press, Sonic could jump, or if you're running at full speed to go through a loop-de-loop, you could press down the curl up into a ball and plow through everything. Now, it's not just about the speed here, it's more about a terrific platforming experience that doesn't feel too unfair. this is definitely one of the biggest experiences to be had on a 16-bit console. Back over to the NES, we have the lesser-known Vice Project Doom, a game that was story-based, that is terrific and sort of like Ninja Gaiden in its difficulty. There's also some driving sequences here that are just superb, with some interesting special effects that look like they're doing stuff that the Nintendo just could not do. This game itself is a masterful piece of engineering, how they managed to get all this into an NES card. However, when you look at everything that came out in 1991 with Techno Super Bowl, Gun Knack, and Vice Project Doom, together, they still don't stand up against Sonic the Hedgehog, a game that was so good, it pushed the Genesis forward so hard, the Super Nintendo had a lot of catching up to do. So in 1991, I gotta give the win to the more powerful Sega Genesis. And boy, was that ever a rough conclusion to come to. But of course, that's just my opinion. Thanks for watching. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I had a great time making it, and this was such a hard decision. I literally changed my mind on which one at the last possible second. Sonic the Hedgehog is just way too big of a game to be understated. The fact that it was probably the biggest title of the entire year and pushed the Genesis forward in whole new directions. And I knew this wasn't gonna be a fair fight from the start. After all, they're entirely different console generations. But when you think about it, these two were direct competitors, so this challenge had to happen. And even though you might think this was a ridiculous idea or concept for a video, yeah, that's the type of crap that I do here. So if you have an idea for something that is just truly crazy that no one else will touch, maybe I will do it just like this video that was suggested by one of you lucky viewers out there. So until later, I will see you again, guys.